Hey guys, tonight, as you settle down under your blanket, letting the last thoughts of the day gently fade away, I want to take you somewhere far, far back in time. Somewhere before electricity, before running water, before soaps and shampoos filled our shelves. I want to take you to a world where the nights were darker, the sounds were softer, and life unfolded at a pace that feels almost unreal today. Tonight, we're drifting slowly into the heart of medieval life. Not the battles, not the kings, not the drama, but something quieter, something strangely comforting in its simplicity. How people actually stayed clean, or tried to, in a world without the comforts we take for granted. And along the way, we'll wander through other forgotten corners of daily medieval life, letting each small detail gently carry us deeper into relaxation. So take a deep breath, let your shoulders fall, and imagine a soft candle flickering beside you. The flame moves slowly, almost lazily, as if it too is settling in for the night. This is the light that once guided people through their evenings, warm, unhurried, and alive with the quiet rhythm of the past. Now picture a narrow medieval street just before dawn. There's a faint chill in the air, a quiet silence broken only by the distant sound of someone stirring a fire inside a wooden house. The stones of the street are cold, the smell of last night's hearth smoke still clinging gently to the morning air. And within these houses, people are waking up, not with alarms or lights switching on, but with the soft glow of sunrise pressing through small wooden shutters. Inside one of these homes, you see a woman reaching for a simple wooden bowl filled with water. It eyes and tea fresh from a tap, because taps didn't exist, but carried from a nearby well the evening before. The water is cool, perfectly still, a little cloudy with the faint dust of the bucket it was brought in. Yet for the people of this time, it was perfectly normal, perfectly usable. She dips her hands in and touches the water to her face, wiping away the sleep of the night. There's something beautifully slow about the process, almost ritualistic. No rush, no products, just water, the way water has always been. Medieval cleanliness wasn't like our idea of hygiene at all. It wasn't about smelling like lavender or citrus or a fresh laundry detergent. It was about staying manageable, about keeping dust off the skin, keeping sweat under control, and doing what you could with what you had. And strangely, it worked better than many people think. As we walk further into this sleepy world, I want you to imagine the soft textures, wool clothes that held warmth, linen shirts worn close to the skin, the rough feel of wooden combs used to brush hair every morning. People didn't bathe every day, but they did wash their faces, hands, and hair far more often than most myths suggest. A bucket of water, a cloth, a comb, that was the morning routine, done quietly and calmly, the way you might stretch or sip tea before bed. Imagine the warmth of a medieval bathhouse now, because yes, they existed, and they were more common than most people today realize. You step into a wooden building filled with soft steam rising from large tubs of heated water. The fire that warms the water crackles behind a wooden panel, the glow from it lighting the room in a dim amber color. People come here not just to bathe, but to talk, to relax, to unwind. Bathing was often a social act, a moment of calm in a world that otherwise demanded hard work. And the water, it's not crystal clear like modern baths, but it's warm, soothing, and filled with herbs like rosemary or mint when available. The scent is earthy, gentle, and grounding. Some people even believed that certain herbs could protect them from sickness or cleanse the body spiritually. Whether or not that was true, the comfort of warm water was real. You can almost feel the heat loosening muscles and the slow ripples moving across the surface of the tub. But outside the bathhouses, outside the routines of washing and combing, medieval people had another tool for cleanliness: their clothes. Linen in particular was like an early form of deodorant, soft, breathable, washable. Linen undergarments absorbed sweat and oils from the body, and while the outer wool garments might go weeks or months without a wash, the linen underneath was cleaned far more often, not with chemical detergents, but with water, ash, soap, and sunlight. The sun itself was a cleanser, drying, warming, purifying through its soft, steady heat. Picture a row of linen shirts hanging outside a medieval cottage now, gently swaying in the breeze, the sunlight turning them a soft, glowing white. You might hear birds in the background, feel the warmth rising off the earth, smell the faint scent of spring flowers. Laundry day was tiring, yes, but it was also peaceful in its own way. A chance to step outside, talk to neighbors, and let time stretch out unhurriedly. As you walk through this world with me, let the small details relax you. The sound of water being poured from one bucket to another, the quiet rustle of wool skirts brushing against wooden floors, the slow scrape of a comb pulling through long hair. Life moved at a pace that encouraged calmness, a pace where tasks took as long as they took, and nobody expected more. And now, imagine stepping into the great hall of a medieval castle, where candles flicker against stone walls. Even here, hygiene existed, though in its own unique way. Workers swept the floors daily, removing scraps of straw and bits of food left from the previous night's feast. Rushes spread across the floor were replaced once or twice a year, but in many places, sweet-smelling herbs like lavender or mint were mixed in to keep the air fresh. It didn't smell like a modern perfume, but it didn't smell rotten either. It smelled earthy, herbal, alive. Servants brought warm water to the lord and lady each morning in polished brass basins. The water reflected the candlelight, turning into a shimmering pool of gold. The lord would dip his hands into it, wash his face, and dry himself with a linen cloth carefully woven by skilled hands. Everything was slower, softer, quieter, almost meditative. Even the perfumes of this world were different. Instead of synthetic fragrances, people used balsams, floral waters, and resins. Imagine a noblewoman rubbing a tiny amount of rosewater onto her wrists, the scent delicate and fleeting, or a traveler carrying a small pouch of dried herbs pressed into a wax tablet, releasing a soft fragrance whenever warmed by the sun. And now, as the candle beside you flickers once more, imagine walking through the bustling heart of a medieval town. You see a baker opening his shop, the smell of warm bread drifting into the cool morning air. A blacksmith hammers softly on glowing metal, sparks rising like tiny fireflies. And somewhere nearby, someone is filling a bucket at the town well, water splashing gently, droplets falling onto stone. Despite what we often imagine, medieval towns weren't always dirty. Yes, there were smells. Yes, there was mud. But there was also structured people sweeping their doorsteps, washing clothes at streams, cleaning tools, brushing animals, boiling water for cooking and washing. Life required effort, and effort kept things cleaner than many stories suggest. Take a moment to imagine all these scenes blending together into a soft, continuous world. No phones buzzing, no engines humming, just water, wood, stone, fabric, fire, and time endlessly flowing. And as you breathe slowly, drifting deeper into relaxation, remember that the people of this era lived in a rhythm much closer to nature. Their days were shaped by the sun, their routines guided by the seasons. Life was harder, but it was also calmer. And tonight, as we continue this journey, we'll explore even more of the quiet, forgotten ways they stayed clean, survived daily challenges, and moved through a world built on patience and simplicity. For now, let your mind settle into this slow medieval morning, the soft light growing, the sounds gentle and far away. We'll continue soon, moving deeper into the hidden habits, rituals, and strange little details of medieval hygiene and daily life. So let's step a little deeper now, following the soft morning breeze through the winding medieval streets as the town slowly awakens. The sun is lifting higher, spreading a warm golden haze across the rooftops. The stones beneath your feet feel cool, still holding the chill of the night. But there is something comforting in the way the world stretches and opens itself to the day. As you walk, you pass a woman drawing water from the town well, the rope creaking softly as she lowers the bucket. The sound echoes gently within the stone walls surrounding the well, and when she lifts the bucket back up, droplets fall in slow arcs, catching the early sunlight like tiny sparks of silver. She pours some of the water into a smaller clay jar, the rest sloshing quietly inside the wooden bucket. This water will serve her family for washing, cooking, and rinsing the hands of guests, a precious resource to be used mindfully throughout the day. You notice how practiced she is, how comfortable. In the medieval world, clean water wasn't a thoughtless convenience. It was a skill, a routine, a part of life that shaped every day. And in that necessity, people developed habits that kept them surprisingly tidy, even without the technologies we depend on now. Walking past the well, you catch the scent of damp earth and freshly baked bread drifting from a nearby bakery. The baker is already hard at work, rolling dough on a wooden table dusted with flour. His hands move in rhythmic, patient motions, shaping loaves that will feed countless people by midday. And even here, in the flour-covered workshop, you see a small clay bowl of water set aside, not for baking, but for washing his hands between tasks. The water is murky now, carrying specks of flour floating lazily on the surface, but it shows that hygiene, in small but steady ways, was woven into every part of medieval life. As you continue onward, a gentle breeze carries with it a slightly herbal fragrance. You follow it like a trail, curious, and find yourself in a small garden tucked behind a row of wooden houses. The garden is simple, a few rows of herbs, some flowers, a small stone bench, but there is a feeling of serenity here. You see rosemary, sage, thyme, and mint growing in little clusters. Medieval people used these herbs for cooking, for medicine, and, quite importantly, for cleaning. Rosemary boiled in water created a fragrant rinse for hair. Mint added to bath water refreshed the skin. Sage could be burned to cleanse the air of unpleasant smells. Even lavender, soft and delicate, was dried and tucked into linen chests to keep clothing smelling fresh. Imagine someone in medieval times reaching into a wooden chest, opening the lid to release a hush of lavender-scented air. The clothes inside, though simple, carry a faint, calming fragrance, not strong like modern perfumes, but something gentle, earthy, and natural. The kind of smell that makes a small house feel warm and cared for. As you step back into the street, a group of children wander past, chasing one another while holding small wooden hoops. Their laughter echoes between the cottage walls, light and untroubled. Every now and then, one of them pauses to wipe their hands on their tunics, which are already dusty from playing. And nearby you see a mother dipping a cloth into a bowl of water to clean her child's face, a quick wipe, gentle but firm, removing the traces of morning mischief. Despite everything we hear today, medieval parents often cared deeply about cleanliness. They knew that a dirty child meant a sick child. They knew that water, even if not perfectly clean, was still precious and protective. And so these quick washes, hands, faces, feet, became a natural part of daily life. Now imagine stepping into a small home again, but this time it belongs to a craftsman, perhaps a leatherworker or a potter. Inside, the space is filled with the smell of heated clay or tanned hides. The tools are arranged neatly on a wooden table, and beside them is a small jar of water used to rinse fingers, clean brushes, and wipe surfaces. The craftsman's hands show the marks of his trade, rough and strong. Yet there is a rhythm in the way he stops between tasks to dip a cloth into water and gently clean the residue from his fingers. Not because he is trying to stay pristine, but because clean hands allow him to work better, handle tools more safely, and keep his materials pure. The awareness of cleanliness was not a luxury, it was part of the craft. Move now to a different place, a monastery on a quiet hilltop. The air here feels clearer, cooler, as if time itself moves more slowly. The monks move almost silently through the corridors, their robes brushing softly against stone floors. Monasteries were among the cleanest places in medieval Europe. They had structured routines for washing, bathing, and even grooming. It wasn't unusual for monks to wash their hands multiple times a day, before prayers, before meals, after work, before bed. In the cloister garden, water flows gently from a carved stone fountain. You hear the delicate sound of trickling water, soothing and constant. A monk kneels beside it, washing his hands in the cool stream, the ripples spreading outward in soft circles. Cleanliness, for monks, wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. A pure body reflected a pure heart, and the simple act of washing was a form of devotion. The warm sun begins to rise higher as we drift through these scenes, and you can almost feel it on your skin, like a soft blanket of morning light. The shadows shorten, birds begin to chirp louder, and the town settles into its full rhythm of the day. Let us wander now into another part of medieval hygiene, one many people don't realize existed. Communal bathhouses. We touched them earlier, but now imagine stepping fully into one. The door creaks open softly, and a wave of warm, humid air surrounds you. The room is dimly lit by candles set into small alcoves in the walls. Their flames dance against the rising steam. People sit in large wooden tubs filled with hot water. Some talk quietly, their voices echoing lightly against the wooden beams. Others simply rest, eyes closed, letting the warmth melt away the tension of long days spent farming or crafting. The water carries a delicate scent, maybe mint, maybe chamomile, depending on what herbs the bathhouse keeper added. And although the baths weren't perfectly sanitary by modern standards, They offered something precious: relief, warmth, cleansing, connection. Many medieval people visited bathhouses weekly, or even daily, making them hubs of community life. Step back outside now, where the air is cooler, and imagine walking up a dirt path toward a small cottage at the edge of the village. Here, an elderly woman sits outside on a wooden stool, brushing her long silver hair with a bone comb. She works slowly, patiently, untangling each knot with gentle care. Hair combing was one of the most common daily hygiene practices in the medieval world. People might not have bathed frequently, but they brushed their hair often, sometimes several times a day. The combing removed dust, kept lice at bay, and prevented hair from matting. You can almost hear the soft scraping sound of the comb pulling through strands of hair. It's a calming rhythm, steady, soothing, familiar. Behind her, drying on a clothesline, you see pieces of freshly washed linen, their white fabric glowing softly in the midday sun. On a small wooden table nearby sits a bar of medieval soap, made from animal fat and ash. It smells earthy, almost smoky, but it works. In a world before chemicals and fragrance oils, this simple soap helped people clean their clothes, their hands, and sometimes their skin. As we move slowly through these memories of medieval routines, it becomes clear that while people didn't bathe daily, they did care deeply about staying as clean as possible. They understood the importance of washing hands before meals. They understood the need to keep clothes fresh. They understood the comfort of herbs and the purity of running water. Now, let's walk toward the outskirts of town, following a narrow path leading to a small river. You hear it before you see it, the gentle rush of water tumbling over rocks, the soft splash of small fish breaking the surface. Women kneel at the riverbank, beating linen against smooth stones, the water swirling around their arms like cool ribbons. They laugh, share stories, and work in a peaceful rhythm that matches the flow of the river. Laundry wasn't just a chore, it was a moment of connection, and the running water served not only to clean clothes, but to cleanse the mind. Imagine dipping your hand into that river, feeling the cold, clear water slip between your fingers, grounding you in a way that feels timeless. As the day unfolds, the medieval world continues its quiet routines, meals prepared slowly, work done patiently, moments of rest found in the shade of trees or beside small fires. Hygiene, though simple, is always present. A child washing his hands before being allowed to sit at the table. A farmer rinsing his feet after a long day in the fields. A midwife cleaning her tools with wine or boiled water. Little habits, repeated endlessly, forming a culture of care that often gets forgotten in modern stories. And now, as the light begins to soften once more, hinting that evening is drawing near, the town enters a slower rhythm again. People finish their chores, close their shutters, and gather around hearth fires. The smell of burning wood fills the air, mingling with the aroma of warm broth or fresh herbs drying above the fire. A woman dips a cloth into warm water scented with chamomile, and wipes her hands and face before settling in for the night. A man sits by the fire brushing his hair, smoothing it with a bit of animal fat to keep it manageable. Children wash their feet in a small wooden basin before bed, and slowly, gently, the world grows quiet again. The stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, one by one, like tiny lanterns guiding the night. The sounds become softer, murmured conversations, crackling fires, distant animals settling down. Hygiene was never perfect, but life was real, textured, careful, and surprisingly mindful. So now, as the medieval evening settles into deeper shades of blue and the last hints of sunset fade behind the distant trees, let's stay in this quiet, flickering world a little longer. You can almost feel the warmth of the small hearth fires glowing inside the cottages, the soft crackle of wood splitting under the heat, the faint aroma of herbs hanging above the flames. It's a world that moves slowly, almost like a deep breath held in the chest of history. Inside one of these homes, the firelight glows against the uneven stone walls, casting shadows that sway gently whenever the flame flickers. The family sitting here prepares for their nightly routines, and you begin to notice the simple but intentional ways they care for their bodies before sleep. A wooden basin is placed near the fire to warm slightly in the heat. The water inside shimmers with a faint reflection of the flames, its surface gently disturbed each time someone dips their fingers in. A young girl sits beside her mother, lifting her feet into the basin one at a time. The warm water relaxes her tired muscles after a long day of running, helping, learning, and exploring. She closes her eyes for a moment, enjoying the comfort. Her mother uses a small cloth to wipe the child's neck and hands, humming softly, echoing a rhythm passed down through generations. This simple act, warm water on tired skin, is one of the most ancient forms of self-care, unchanged for centuries. Nearby, the girl's father unwraps a small bundle of cloth containing a bone comb. The comb is worn smooth from years of use, each tooth polished by the repetition of daily grooming. He drags it slowly through his hair, starting from the roots and working down. The comb catches occasionally, pulling a bit, but he continues with patient, steady strokes. Hair combing wasn't just practical in medieval life, it was deeply symbolic. A combed head meant readiness, discipline, and respectability. Many people believed tangled hair trapped negative energy or carried illness, so brushing wasn't only for appearance, it was also a quiet ritual of cleansing, of setting the day to rest. Outside, the night air cools and drifts through the small cracks in the wooden shutters. There is a faint scent of earth, smoke, and distant rain on the wind. You hear footsteps approach the well again, a late-night visitor, perhaps someone drawing one last bucket of water for their animals, or to refill a basin before bed. The rope groans softly as it slides over the wooden beam, and then you hear the bucket plunge into the darkness below. A splash, a moment of stillness, and then the heavy pullback upward. Even this simple act becomes part of the rhythm of medieval hygiene, water always moving from source to home, from well to day, like a lifeline shared through the entire community. Now imagine drifting quietly past the cottages and walking toward the manor house that sits at the far end of the village. It isn't a castle, but a large wooden structure with stone foundations, home to a minor lord or wealthy landowner. Through its small windows, you see servants finishing their chores for the night. One servant carries a polished copper basin toward the lord's chamber. The basin glimmers softly in the torchlight, reflecting warm gold as she walks. This nightly ritual is important. The lord will wash his hands and face before sleep, a practice that was surprisingly common among the more privileged classes. The basin is filled with warm water, infused lightly with herbs, perhaps a handful of thyme or petals from a rose, added for fragrance. Inside the chamber, the lord sits on a wooden chair near the hearth. The fire burns low, sending tiny sparks upward like drifting fireflies. He dips his hands into the warm water, closes his eyes, and lets the warmth relax the tension of the day. After washing, he dries his hands on a linen cloth, carefully woven and cleaned earlier that morning. There is calmness here, a moment of mental release before entering sleep. This gentle care extended even into medieval bed-making. Instead of mattresses as we know them, many people slept on sacks stuffed with straw, feathers, or wool. Before lying down, they would shake out the bedding, fluffing it to remove dust or insects. Richer homes sometimes sprinkled herbs like lavender, mint, or sweet woodruff between the layers of bedding. A soft, natural scent filled the sleeping space, soothing the senses and creating a feeling of safety and comfort. Step deeper into the night now and imagine moving through a monastery once more. The monks are preparing for their evening prayers, their compline, and the atmosphere is almost dreamlike in its stillness. Before prayer, they wash again, this time symbolically. A stone basin stands outside the chapel, its water cool and clear beneath the moonlight. One by one, the monks dip their hands into it, letting the water flow between their fingers. The sound of dripping echoes faintly against the stone walls, creating a quiet, sacred rhythm. For monks, cleanliness wasn't just physical, it represented purification of the spirit. And in their libraries, they even wrote early instructions on hygiene, how to wash, how often to bathe, how to keep bedding clean. These documents offer us rare windows into medieval thinking, showing that people took far more care of their bodies than the clichés suggest. Now move with me through the darkness, leaving the monastery behind and following a narrow path descending into a valley. You arrive at a riverbank once again, but this time the river is darker, quieter, illuminated only by the shimmering reflection of the moon. Here, you see a lone traveler kneeling beside the water. His cloak is worn from weeks on the road, his boots muddy, his hair tied loosely behind his back. The traveler cups his hands in the cold river, splashing water onto his face. The chill is invigorating, waking him even as he prepares to rest. Travelers often carried small hygiene kits, a comb, a cloth, maybe a piece of soap, and sometimes a tiny bottle of rosewater or vinegar for cleansing. He unwraps a small pouch tied to his belt and takes out a wooden toothpick. Medieval dental hygiene wasn't sophisticated, but people commonly used toothpicks after meals to clear food and avoid toothache. Many travelers even chewed aromatic sticks made from fennel, mint, or licorice root to freshen their breath and clean their teeth. This man does the same, slowly chewing as he watches the moonlit water flow by. His breath softens, his shoulders relax, and he lies back on his cloak, listening to the nighttime creatures stirring around him. Let the river carry us onward now, following its flow until we reach a large medieval town. Here, the streets are wider, the houses taller, and the sounds more varied, even at night. Candles flicker through small windows, and you hear the faint murmur of people cleaning before sleep. A woman pours leftover warm water from a pot into a large wooden tub for a quick rinse after a long day of work. Bathing inside homes was less common than at bathhouses, but it did happen, especially for women, children, or the elderly. She steps into the tub, the water only reaching her ankles, but it's enough to wash away the sweat and dust of the day. She uses a simple cloth to wipe her arms, her neck, her legs, moving slowly, letting the warmth soothe her. Above her, hanging from wooden beams, herbs dry in small bundles, sage, rosemary, and yarrow. These herbs were used not only in cooking but in healing and hygiene. People believed that sage strengthened the body, rosemary cleansed the air, and yarrow protected against illness. Whether these beliefs were scientific or not, they gave comfort, and comfort has always been a form of wellness. In another home, a barber surgeon prepares his tools for the next day. His workspace is modest: a chair, a small table, and a wooden box filled with razors, combs, shears, and bandages. Barbers were important figures in medieval hygiene. They cut hair, trimmed beards, cleaned wounds, and sometimes even extracted teeth. Imagine a man sitting in the barber's chair earlier that day. The barber draped a linen cloth across his shoulders and used a small bowl of hot water to soften the hair along the man's jaw. The steam rose gently, carrying the scent of herbs used to heat the water. With a sharpened razor, the barber shaved the man's beard in smooth, careful strokes. It was a moment of grooming, cleanliness, and social bonding, quiet, intimate, human. As the night grows deeper, the town's energy slowly fades. Doors close, windows shutter, street cats curl into small corners seeking warmth, and the soft hum of medieval life settles into stillness once again. Across the entire medieval world, from small cottages to grand manors, from village streams to bustling bathhouses, hygiene was a continuous, thoughtful part of daily existence. Not perfect, not modern, but real, intentional, and shaped by the rhythms of nature. So now, as the medieval night deepens and the moon glows softly above the thatched rooftops, let's linger a little longer in this quiet world of rituals and gentle routines. The firelight flickers through small windows, casting long shadows that sway across uneven stone floors. Each movement feels deliberate, unhurried, as though time itself is breathing slowly. Inside a modest home, a mother is preparing her children for sleep. She lights a small candle and places it on the table beside a basin of warm water. The water shimmers in the soft light, reflecting the dancing flame. She dips a cloth in it and gently wipes each child's face and hands, careful not to rush. The youngest leans against her shoulder, relaxing into the warmth of the cloth. The faint scent of herbs lingering in the air, perhaps rosemary or lavender added to the water to soothe skin and calm the mind. Bathing habits in the medieval period were often surprising. While full-body baths were not daily events for most people, those who could afford it often indulged in seasonal baths, especially during warmer months. Wealthier homes might prepare large tubs filled with hot water, infused with fragrant herbs, rose petals, or even wine. These baths were not only about cleanliness but also a sensory ritual, the smell, warmth, and tactile sensation of water providing comfort and relaxation, a gentle end to the day. Now picture a barber surgeon's modest workshop. These figures played a pivotal role in medieval hygiene. Their tools weren't just for cutting hair. They cleaned, trimmed, and occasionally treated minor injuries. A razor, carefully honed, would shave the day's grime from a man's jaw. A wooden comb would untangle hair, sometimes knotted with dust or lice. Small bowls of water, perhaps slightly warmed by the nearby hearth, were used to rinse the combs and wipe away sweat. It was meticulous work, slow and deliberate, almost meditative. Moving outside to the village streets, You hear the soft rustle of the wind through wooden shutters and over cobblestones. The night is calm, quiet, except for the occasional animal stirrings and the distant drip of water from a thatched roof. People cared for their hands and faces, even when full bathing wasn't possible. The ritual of washing dipping fingers in water, wiping the face, brushing hair was repeated daily. A small but essential practice of hygiene. Imagine now a group of children playing near the river, their laughter muted by distance. Their mothers approach with small wooden basins, scooping water from the river for quick cleanses after their games. These spontaneous washes kept dirt and sweat at bay, showing that even in the midst of play, medieval people were attentive to cleanliness. The river itself, flowing steadily under moonlight, seemed like a gentle guardian of the town's daily hygiene, quietly moving life forward. Inside another home, a craftsman tends to his tools. Leather scraps and clay dust have settled on his hands. He pauses, dips a cloth in a small bowl of water, and wipes his fingers clean before continuing work. Clean hands are essential, not merely for appearance, but to ensure the quality of one's craft and the safety of meals and goods. This attention to detail, practiced daily, illustrates how hygiene was woven seamlessly into medieval life. Step now into the quiet world of a monastery. Here, hygiene and ritual intertwine. Monks follow strict routines, washing hands before meals and before prayers. Water basins are set near the cloister, cool and clear beneath the soft glow of moonlight. One monk kneels, letting the water flow over his fingers, the droplets echoing faintly against the stone. This act is more than cleanliness, it is reflection, mindfulness, and preparation for rest. Monks believed that a clean body supported a clean mind, reinforcing the connection between physical and spiritual care. The night continues its slow passage as we wander further. Imagine a traveler along a forest path, stopping beside a small stream. His boots are caked with mud, his cloak damp with evening dew. He cups the water, splashes his face, and rinses his hands. In his satchel lies a simple wooden comb, a small bar of soap, and perhaps a tiny vial of rosewater. These items, though modest, represent the timeless human desire for comfort, freshness, and dignity even in transient spaces far from home. Now envision a noblewoman in her chamber, preparing for sleep. Her attendants bring a basin of warm water scented with herbs, and she dips a cloth to cleanse her face and hands. Hair is carefully brushed, sometimes oiled lightly to keep it soft and manageable. Perfumes, made from flowers, resins, and spices, are applied in small, delicate amounts, enough to impart a gentle fragrance, never overwhelming. This nightly care reinforces not only personal hygiene but also a sense of serenity, structure, and preparation for rest. Medieval hygiene extended to clothing as well. Linen, soft and breathable, was worn close to the skin, while wool provided warmth. Linen shirts were often washed more frequently than outer garments, absorbing sweat and oils. The washing process was slow. Clothes were soaked in water, scrubbed with a mild soap made from animal fat and ash, rinsed, and hung to dry in sunlight. The sun acted as a natural purifier, bleaching the fabric while killing some bacteria and refreshing the fibers. Picture clotheslines swaying gently outside cottages, laundry flapping softly in the breeze. Each item, washed and dried with care, contributes to the overall hygiene of the household. Even small touches sprinkling herbs between layers of bedding or linen enhanced cleanliness and comfort. The scents of mint, rosemary, and lavender carried through the home, creating a calm, pleasant atmosphere, easing both body and mind toward rest. As we continue, let's explore a slightly unusual aspect of medieval hygiene: oral care. People used toothpicks, chew sticks, and aromatic herbs to keep their mouths clean. Some cultures even made early forms of toothpaste using powdered herbs, crushed shells, or charcoal. Though primitive by modern standards, these practices reveal a thoughtful awareness of the importance of maintaining health and comfort. Moving outside again, the village river glimmers under starlight. Women kneel along the banks, washing clothes or giving their children a final rinse before bed. Gentle splashes, soft laughter, and the quiet flow of water create a serene lullaby for the town. The river, ever moving, symbolizes continuity and care, an unbroken presence in the rhythm of medieval life. In wealthier homes, bathhouses offered communal bathing experiences. These were social as well as hygienic spaces. Large tubs filled with hot water, scented with herbs, encouraged conversation, relaxation, and mutual care. The water itself was warm and soothing, a gentle counterpoint to the hard labor of daily life. The atmosphere was calm, the steam curling slowly, softening both walls and worries. Even the tools of grooming carried intention. Bone combs, brushes made from animal hair, simple razors, and small knives were carefully maintained. They were more than implements, they were extensions of personal care, used thoughtfully and often daily. A smooth combing of hair, a careful shave, a soft wipe of water across the skin. These actions were small meditations, quiet markers of self-respect and mindfulness. Now, let us imagine the night in a medieval castle. The corridors are hushed, the flicker of torches reflecting off stone walls. Servants carry basins of warm water from room to room. Lords and ladies wash their hands, their faces, preparing for rest. Herbs hung in small bundles scent the chambers, while rushes on the floors carry faint natural fragrances, absorbing dirt and odor. Even in grand spaces, cleanliness was deliberate and purposeful. The air grows cooler as midnight approaches, yet a sense of calm pervades. Children sleep snugly in straw-filled beds, elders settle into wooden frames with soft blankets, and adults enjoy a final moment of quiet reflection. The rituals of hygiene, washing, combing, rinsing, and caring for clothes and skin form a comforting rhythm, a steady heartbeat guiding life through the night. And so, as you drift in this slow medieval world, notice the delicate balance of necessity and care. Life was hard, yet people made time for these small rituals. Each act of washing, each combing of hair, each carefully hung piece of linen contributed to a sense of dignity, comfort, and order. These practices remind us that hygiene is not just about cleanliness, but about mindfulness, patience, and rhythm. Tonight, as our journey continues, we will explore more of these rituals, the subtle tools and techniques, the seasonal habits, the full-body baths that marked special occasions, and the little-known ways medieval people protected themselves from sickness and odor. Each detail will carry us further into the calm, immersive world of history, letting your mind relax, your breath deepen, and sleep approach gently. So now, as the medieval night stretches even deeper, let's linger on a quieter, more intimate part of daily life, the personal rituals and tools people used to maintain hygiene. Even when life was hard and resources were limited, imagine the soft glow of candlelight in a small room, the flickering shadows dancing across walls, and the faint smell of herbs from bundles hanging above a wooden chest. Every detail of the room, every object, tells a story about care, comfort, and routine. A woman carefully unwraps a small bundle of linen cloths. They are soft, slightly worn, yet clean, each piece scrubbed, rinsed, and hung to dry earlier in the day. Linen was invaluable in medieval hygiene, breathable, absorbent, and washable. It helped protect the skin and maintain a semblance of cleanliness beneath heavier outer garments. Even in modest homes, these cloths were used for washing, wiping, and caring for the body. Their texture, gentle against the skin, offered a quiet comfort after long hours of work or travel. Nearby, a wooden comb rests on a small table. Its teeth are worn smooth by countless uses. The act of combing hair was a deliberate, meditative ritual. In a world without modern shampoos or hair conditioners, a simple combing removed dust, detangled hair, and reduced lice infestations. People believed that brushing hair in the morning and evening helped circulate energy through the body, though perhaps they simply appreciated the calming rhythm of repetition. Now picture a young boy kneeling beside a small basin of water, dipping his hands carefully and washing his face under the soft glow of a flickering candle. The water is slightly warm, poured from a larger bucket brought in from the well. He pauses after each gentle wipe, letting the water catch the light, the surface rippling softly. Children in medieval times often learned these habits early. Even simple acts of washing hands before meals or cleaning faces after work became part of their rhythm, teaching them patience, care, and mindfulness. Beyond the home, medieval towns often had communal wells and small fountains, places where people drew water for drinking, cooking, and washing. Imagine stepping to the edge of such a well at night, feeling the cool stone beneath your fingers as you lower a bucket. The rope creaks softly in the stillness. Water is lifted slowly, splashing gently, and poured into basins or containers for household use. Even in darkness, the sound of water is calming, like a lullaby that has echoed through centuries. In wealthier homes, bathhouses were a highlight of hygiene. These communal spaces, sometimes grand, sometimes modest, were filled with warm water infused with herbs, flowers, or even small amounts of wine. Steam curls upward, softening walls and floors, carrying the aroma of lavender, rosemary, or mint. Patrons enter slowly, shedding layers of clothing and tension alike, letting the water soothe muscles tired from labor or travel. Bathing was not only practical, it was a sensory experience, a rare indulgence that nurtured body and mind. Consider the tools and implements that accompanied these baths. Wooden tubs, carved from oak or pine, held the water. Small basins allowed for targeted washing of the face or hands. Cloths, soft and absorbent, were used to wipe and scrub gently. And herbs, often dried in small bundles, added both fragrance and a sense of ritual. Even in the simplest homes, people understood that water and touch could be restorative, calming, and purifying. Moving now to a quieter moment in a noble household, a lady prepares for bed. Her chamber is modest yet orderly, filled with small comforts, a soft mattress of straw and feathers, a basin of warm water, and bundles of herbs tied neatly with string. She dips a cloth in the warm water, washing her hands and arms, then her face, letting the sensation relax her. Her hair, carefully brushed and lightly oiled, falls smoothly over her shoulders. A faint sprinkle of rosewater carries a delicate fragrance, creating a serene atmosphere. Every small act is purposeful, an end-of-day ritual designed to soothe both body and mind. Even outside the home, hygiene rituals were woven into daily work. Craftsmen, farmers, and travelers took small but meaningful steps to maintain cleanliness. Hands were washed after handling raw materials, before meals, or when finishing a long day. Tools were wiped down, sometimes rinsed with water, and occasionally even sanitized with ash or vinegar. Every small action was part of a rhythm that connected people to the world around them, teaching attentiveness, patience, and care. Let's step once more into the quiet of the monastery. Monks are preparing for evening prayer. Stone basins stand in corridors, their surfaces cool beneath the moonlight. One by one, they wash their hands, letting water flow gently between fingers, listening to the faint echo in the stone halls. These acts are not merely practical, they are symbolic. Clean hands prepare the spirit, and the rhythm of washing before prayer reinforces mindfulness, humility, and reflection. The sensory experience, the cool touch of water, the faint smell of herbs, the quiet echo of stone, carries a profound calmness. Imagine, too, the seasonal variations in medieval hygiene. In warmer months, people bathed more frequently, using rivers, streams, or bathhouses. Clothing could be changed and washed more easily, and the sun helped purify fabrics. In colder months, bathing was less frequent, but washing hands, faces, and feet remained important. Herbs were burned in homes to refresh the air, linen undergarments were changed regularly, and small rituals, brushing hair, wiping skin, rinsing mouths, continued faithfully, regardless of temperature or season. Even dental hygiene had its unique medieval forms. Toothpicks, chew sticks made from aromatic twigs, and small brushes kept teeth relatively clean. Some people chewed herbs or roots to freshen breath. While primitive compared to modern dental care, these habits reflected a thoughtful awareness of health and self-care. Cleanliness, even in small, overlooked forms, was a consistent part of life. Picture a traveler at night, pausing by a forest stream. He rinses his face and hands, dips his feet in the cool water, and breathes deeply. A small wooden comb and a piece of soap lie beside him, reminders of his attention to hygiene even on the road. The rhythmic flow of the stream mirrors the slow cadence of medieval routines, connecting the traveler to nature, to necessity, and to care. Inside another home, a craftsman dips a soft cloth into a small basin of water to wipe his hands after finishing work. The tactile sensation of water, the gentle motion of rubbing, creates a moment of calm. The craftsman understands that cleanliness is practical, but also soothing, a way to separate labor from rest. Every small ritual, combing hair, wiping hands, rinsing a face, becomes part of the unhurried flow of the day. Imagine the air scented with drying herbs, sage, lavender, rosemary, yarrow. These scents mingle with smoke from the hearth and the faint aroma of baked bread or stew, forming a sensory environment that is both practical and comforting. Hygiene in the medieval world was not simply about avoiding filth, It was about creating spaces and routines that nurtured the body and mind, even amidst the difficulties of daily life. As the night deepens, picture a child lying down in a straw-filled mattress, a small bundle of fresh linen beneath them. Their mother adjusts the blankets, tucking in edges carefully, and passes a hand over the child's hair, smoothing stray strands. The child breathes deeply, lulled by the quiet ritual of touch, scent, and warmth. Even small gestures, dipping a cloth in water, combing hair, or sprinkling a few herbs on bedding, carry immense comfort, forming a timeless connection between care, routine, and serenity. And as the town settles into stillness, doors closed, animals quiet, the moon casting silver light across streets and rooftops, every act of hygiene, washing, combing, rinsing, scrubbing, or perfuming, becomes part of a meditative rhythm. Life was slower, yes, and less convenient, but there was a constant mindfulness in these daily routines. Each movement, each small ritual, reflected an awareness of self, community, and the natural world. Tonight, as we continue to drift through this medieval world, we will explore even more of these fascinating rituals: rare full-body baths, seasonal hygiene practices, perfumes and scented oils, strange grooming tools, and forgotten tips that people once used to stay clean, comfortable, and healthy. Every detail will carry us further into a slow, calming, immersive journey, perfect for relaxing your mind and easing into sleep. So now, as the medieval night continues to deepen, let's wander further into the quieter, more personal corners of life, the places where hygiene, ritual, and comfort intersect in ways we rarely imagine today. Picture the gentle flicker of candlelight on stone walls, the faint aroma of herbs hanging in small bundles, and the soft rustle of linens as people prepare for rest. Each movement feels deliberate, slow, almost meditative, as though the night itself is breathing alongside the world. Inside a modest home, a mother places a basin of warm water near the hearth. The warmth of the fire radiates softly, creating a comforting pool of light and heat. She dips a small cloth into the water, wringing it carefully, and wipes the hands and face of her child. The child leans into the touch, enjoying the softness of the cloth, the warmth of the water, and the calm presence of the mother. Simple actions like these, washing, wiping, caring, are the foundation of hygiene in the medieval household, quietly forming a rhythm of attention and love. Let us imagine now the more ceremonial forms of bathing that took place occasionally, often in wealthier homes or communal bathhouses. Full-body baths were rare, typically reserved for special occasions, seasonal changes, or social rituals. A wooden tub would be filled with warm water, often scented with herbs, petals, or even small amounts of wine. Steam would curl up gently, softening the stone or wooden walls of the room. The experience was both cleansing and restorative, a luxurious pause in the daily labor of medieval life. In the bathhouse, patrons would remove layers of clothing, dipping first a hand, then a foot, and gradually immersing themselves in the warm water. The atmosphere was quiet, punctuated only by soft splashes, whispers, or the occasional murmur of conversation. Bathing in this way was a social and sensory experience. Water, warmth, and fragrance combined to create a feeling of renewal, a gentle meditation on the body's rhythms and needs. Now, picture a craftsman at his workbench, finishing a long day of labor. His hands are dusty from wood, clay, or leather. He pauses, dips a cloth into a small basin of water, and carefully wipes his fingers clean. The simple act of cleansing, repeated countless times, reflects a rhythm that was deeply ingrained in medieval life. Work, clean, rest. Even small rituals, washing hands before meals, rinsing the face after labor, were essential for health, comfort, and social propriety. Outside, the air carries the faint scent of herbs hanging from beams, mingling with smoke from fires and the aroma of baked bread. These scents were intentional, chosen to comfort, refresh, and purify spaces. Lavender, rosemary, mint, and sage were common choices, each contributing to a sense of calm, cleanliness, and order. The interplay of fire, water, and herbal fragrances formed a sensory environment that supported hygiene, comfort, and well-being. Let's drift to another home, this time in a wealthier household. A noblewoman prepares for sleep with a small team of attendants. Warm water is poured into a copper basin, infused with petals and herbs. She dips a cloth, washing her hands, arms, and face slowly, deliberately. Her hair is combed carefully, and a touch of oil is applied to keep it smooth and manageable. A few drops of rose water or scented oil are dabbed at the wrists and neck. Each gesture, though simple, is purposeful, creating an intimate ritual of comfort, calm, and preparation for rest. Even the smallest implements played a role in hygiene. Bone combs, small brushes, razors, and wooden bowls were carefully maintained. They were extensions of care, tools to maintain the body's integrity and comfort. Brushing hair removed tangles and dirt, reduced lice, and soothed the scalp. Razors and shears were used with caution to trim beards or hair, often ritualistically, as part of preparing for the next day or special occasions. Now imagine walking along a quiet street at night, the moonlight reflecting off wooden shutters and cobblestones. A traveler pauses at the edge of a stream, washing his hands and face in the cool, flowing water. He may pull a small chew stick from his satchel to freshen his teeth, or use a cloth to wipe away dirt from his fingers and arms. Even on the road, hygiene was not neglected. Travelers carried simple tools to maintain comfort, cleanliness, and health, understanding that small routines could preserve well-being amidst uncertainty and fatigue. Step into a monastery again, where nightly rituals are both spiritual and hygienic. Monks wash their hands before evening prayers, sometimes washing their faces or feet as well. The water is cool and clear, flowing from stone basins. The act of washing becomes meditative, a way to center the mind while cleansing the body. Herbs and incense may scent the room, creating a subtle atmosphere of calm and focus. Every gesture reinforces mindfulness, attention to self, and harmony with the rhythms of life. Seasonal habits were also important. In warmer months, bathing and washing were more frequent, taking advantage of rivers, streams, and bathhouses. Linen clothing could be washed, herbs dried and stored, and full body bathing enjoyed occasionally. In colder months, water was used more sparingly. Hand, face, and foot washes remained daily routines, while aromatic herbs, scented oils, and clean linen maintained a sense of freshness and comfort. Medieval people adapted their hygiene to the seasons, creating rituals that were practical, protective, and soothing. Dental hygiene, too, had its own rhythms. Toothpicks, aromatic chew sticks, and simple brushes helped keep mouths relatively clean. Herbs and roots were chewed to freshen breath, while abrasive powders or pastes were sometimes used to scrub teeth. Although primitive by modern standards, these practices demonstrate a careful, intentional attention to the body. Cleanliness, in all its small forms, was valued, nurtured, and preserved. Now, drift with me to a village river at night. Women kneel on the banks, washing clothing or giving children a final rinse before bed. The river's flow is gentle, its surface reflecting the moonlight in shimmering patterns. Every splash, every ripple, forms part of a timeless rhythm, water cleansing, flowing, connecting communities and households alike. The air is cool, scented faintly by herbs or nearby fires, and the night is filled with calm sounds, soft laughter, the murmur of water, the occasional hoot of an owl. In urban centers, bathhouses remained a cornerstone of hygiene. Even modest establishments provided large tubs of warm, scented water, communal in nature, where people could relax, cleanse, and socialize. Steam softened the air and walls, creating an enveloping cocoon of warmth and calm. The atmosphere encouraged patience, reflection, and gentle care of the body. Bathing became a ritual, a pause, a moment to feel both clean and comforted. Inside smaller homes, evening hygiene continued with subtle gestures. A cloth wiped across the skin, hands washed in small basins, hair combed, feet rinsed, linen changed or freshened, herbs placed in beds, chests, or water enhanced comfort and scent. These small acts, repeated daily, formed a quiet rhythm that carried both practical and emotional significance, nurturing body, mind, and spirit. And so, as midnight deepens, imagine a household settling into calm. Children rest, elders close their eyes, and adults perform their final routines of care. Water, cloths, combs, and herbs complete the day's cycle. The night is quiet, safe, and calm. Hygiene was not merely cleanliness, it was a comforting, mindful act, a bridge between labor and rest, effort and release, body and spirit. Tonight, as our journey continues, we will explore even more unique aspects of medieval hygiene. The most unusual grooming tools, special seasonal baths, perfumes and oils that shaped daily life, and the fascinating ways people cared for themselves from head to toe. Each detail will carry us deeper into this soothing, immersive world, relaxing your mind and preparing your body for gentle sleep. So now, as the medieval night drifts further into quiet, let us linger on the fascinating, sometimes unusual tools and practices of personal hygiene, the little-known methods people used to keep clean, and the rhythms that made these acts both practical and calming. The candlelight flickers softly across stone walls, the scent of herbs lingers in the air, and the soft rustle of linen or the trickle of water forms a gentle soundtrack for this serene journey. Inside a small home, a woman prepares her nightly routine. She unwraps a wooden comb, smooth and polished from repeated use. With deliberate, careful strokes, she brushes her hair, starting at the roots and moving downward. Hair combing was a universal practice in medieval life, serving both practical and symbolic purposes. It removed dirt and tangles, helped reduce lice infestations, and represented readiness and self-respect. Even for children, daily combing was a way to instill habits of care, patience, and mindfulness. Nearby, a small bowl of water waits. Sometimes it is warmed near the fire, infused with a few herbs, rosemary, lavender, mint, for gentle fragrance and soothing qualities. She dips a soft cloth into the water and wipes her hands, her face, her forearms. Each motion is slow, almost meditative, a quiet ritual performed with patience and intention. The water shimmers in the flickering candlelight, tiny ripples catching the glow like scattered stars. Now imagine a slightly wealthier household. A noblewoman's attendants prepare a basin of water infused with rose petals and mild herbs. The lady dips her hands and forearms into the warm water, then gently wipes her face. Her hair is brushed carefully, sometimes lightly oiled with perfumed oils to keep it smooth and manageable. A few drops of rose water may be dabbed at her wrists or the nape of her neck. This small ritual, repeated nightly, is as much about comfort and sensory pleasure as it is about hygiene. Step outside into the quiet streets and picture a traveler pausing at a stream. He rinses his hands, his face, and even his feet in the cool, flowing water. From his satchel, he retrieves a simple wooden comb and a small piece of soap. These items, though modest, are essential tools for maintaining dignity, comfort, and health while on the road. Even during long journeys, medieval people preserved routines of cleanliness, understanding the importance of small, repeated acts of care. In urban centers, bathhouses provided communal opportunities for bathing. These were not only practical but also social and sensory experiences. Large wooden tubs filled with hot water, sometimes scented with herbs, flowers, or small amounts of wine, offered warmth and relaxation. Steam softened the air and walls, creating a cocoon of comfort. Patrons entered slowly, immersed themselves gradually, and allowed the water to soothe tired muscles. Gentle conversation, soft splashes, and muted laughter filled the space, forming a calming rhythm that echoed across stone and wood. Inside smaller homes, the evening hygiene routine continued quietly. A cloth wiped across the skin, hands washed in small basins, hair brushed, feet rinsed, linen garments changed or refreshed. Bundles of herbs, sage, lavender, rosemary, or mint, added fragrance, comfort, and a sense of ritual. Even in modest settings, these practices created an environment of calm, order, and care, nurturing both body and mind. Imagine now a craftsman, finishing a day of work with dusty hands and arms. He dips a cloth into a small basin of water and gently wipes his fingers, arms, and face. The tactile sensation of water is soothing, a pause between labor and rest. Tools are cleaned and set aside. Hands, hair, and clothing receive gentle attention. This deliberate care, repeated daily, forms a quiet rhythm, a meditative sequence that shapes comfort, cleanliness, and well-being. Monasteries offer another example of the deep connection between hygiene and mindfulness. Monks wash hands before evening prayers, sometimes washing feet as well. Stone basins provide clear, cool water. The sound of droplets hitting stone echoes softly. Herbs or incense may scent the air. Each act is both practical and spiritual, cleansing the body, calming the mind, preparing for reflection and rest. Every small movement, repeated with care, reinforces attention, presence, and harmony. Seasonal variations influenced medieval hygiene. In warmer months, rivers, streams, and bathhouses allowed more frequent bathing. Linen garments could be washed, herbs dried, and full body baths enjoyed occasionally. In colder months, Washing was less frequent, but hands, faces, and feet remained clean. Herbs were burned in homes to refresh the air, scented oils applied to maintain comfort, and linen changed regularly. People adapted their routines to the rhythms of nature, blending practicality with sensory and emotional comfort. Dental hygiene, too, followed a rhythm. Toothpicks, aromatic chew sticks, and simple brushes helped maintain oral health. Herbs and roots were chewed to freshen breath, while abrasive powders were sometimes used to clean teeth. Though primitive compared to modern standards, these routines reflect a mindful approach to care. Cleanliness, in even small details, was a valued part of life. Picture now a noblewoman's chamber at night. A soft mattress of straw and feathers waits. A basin of warm water sits near the bed, gently scented with herbs. Linen is fresh and clean. The woman dips a cloth into the water, washing hands, forearms, and face. Hair is brushed, lightly oiled, and scented. Perfumed oils are applied sparingly to skin, leaving a gentle, soothing fragrance. Every movement is deliberate, a calming meditation on the body's comfort and preparation for sleep. Even the smallest implements were essential: bone combs, small brushes, wooden bowls, and razors. Each tool was maintained carefully, used thoughtfully, and often daily. Hair brushing removed tangles and dirt, reduced lice, and soothed the scalp. Razors and shears were used cautiously to trim hair or beards, maintaining both cleanliness and appearance. These simple tools, combined with routine, created a rhythm of care that permeated medieval life. Now drift to a village river at night. Women kneel along the banks, washing clothing or giving children a final rinse before bed. Gentle splashes, soft laughter, and the flowing water create a peaceful, timeless lullaby. The air is cool, scented faintly with herbs or nearby fires. Even in simple acts like washing garments or rinsing hands and feet, a sense of order, calm, and attention to well-being is evident. Bathhouses remained central to urban hygiene, offering warmth, comfort, and community. Steam filled the rooms, softening the senses. Large tubs provided a space for gentle immersion, social interaction, and quiet reflection. Herbs, flowers, or small amounts of wine scented the water, creating a soothing, meditative experience. Patrons left feeling refreshed, cleansed, and comforted, a rare pause in the laborious rhythm of daily life. In homes, evening routines continued quietly. A cloth wiped across skin, hands washed in basins, hair brushed, feet rinsed, linen changed or freshened. Herbs sprinkled in beds or hung from beams enhanced comfort and fragrance. Even modest homes maintained these small rituals, fostering calm, hygiene, and a sense of dignity. As the night deepens further, picture a household settling into stillness. Children sleep, elders rest, adults perform final acts of care. Water, cloths, combs, and herbs complete the day's cycle. Hygiene was not merely cleanliness, it was comfort, mindfulness, and preparation for rest. Every movement, every small ritual, connected body, mind, and environment, forming a rhythm that carried people gently into sleep. The early medieval morning drifted slowly into a softer, quieter stretch of the day, and as the castle's stone walls warmed in the weak sunlight, people gradually began tending to small tasks that were part hygiene, part routine survival. Even though bathing was rare and soap was precious, medieval people still relied on little habits to stay presentable, to feel somewhat fresh, and to avoid the kind of discomfort that came with living in a world where dirt was unavoidable. And as the morning continued, new details of their daily cleanliness began revealing themselves with a slow, almost sleepy rhythm. One of the most overlooked aspects of medieval hygiene was hair care, which was far more deliberate than most people imagine. Men and women alike used wooden combs with surprisingly fine teeth, crafted with care by artisans who understood the need for smoothness and precision. These combs served a dual purpose. They detangled the hair and also scraped out debris, dust, and the tiny creatures that made life itchy. A person might sit by the fire or the open door of a cottage, combing methodically from scalp to ends, letting bits of straw or dry flakes fall into the dirt floor where they were swept away with a branch broom. The motion was slow, almost meditative, a daily reset that brought small comfort in a world so full of physical effort. But hair was not just brushed, it was often oiled, too, sometimes with animal fats, sometimes with fragrant herbs steeped in warm water. sometimes with a mixture of vinegar and rosemary that left a sharper scent lingering in the air. These oils made hair easier to manage and helped protect it from the wind, the sun, and the dryness that came from living close to smoke and outdoor work. Even peasants found ways to create simple oils using herbs grown in small gardens or collected from nearby fields. The result was hair that, though not washed often, still carried a sheen and softness that we rarely associate with the Middle Ages. Women especially took great pride in keeping their hair braided or pinned up neatly. Loose hair could catch pests, gather soot, or get in the way of work. But there was also a cultural expectation. Loose hair was seen as childish or inappropriate for grown women outside of intimate or ceremonial settings. And so, each morning, fingers moved patiently through strands, dividing them, smoothing them, weaving them into braids, or wrapping them into knots, secured with wooden pins or bone needles. Clothing, too, played an unexpected role in staying clean. A person might own only one or two outer garments, but linen underclothes were common enough and far easier to wash than wool. Linen was prized for its ability to absorb sweat and oils from the skin, acting like a protective layer between the body and the heavy clothing worn over it. Even peasants understood this and took care to wash their linen garments as often as possible, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, depending on access to water. Washing linen was an event in itself. On wash days, women would gather by a river or stream, soaking the cloth until it loosened. Some used wooden paddles to beat the fabric, lifting away grime with rhythmic, echoing thumps that carried up and down the water. Others scrubbed garments against smooth stones, letting the current carry away the soap foam. Soap was precious, so sometimes they used ash or even just vigorous scrubbing alone to clean the cloth. The air filled with the smell of wet linen, river water, and whatever herbs happened to grow nearby. In a world without perfumes or sprays, freshly washed linen was one of the purest scents a person could enjoy. Inside towns and cities, wash days looked different. People gathered around communal washhouses or wells, trading gossip and stories as they scrubbed. The time spent washing wasn't just hygienic, it was social, a rare chance for connection and conversation. And in these moments, the fabric of everyday life felt a little lighter, a little softer. But hygiene had another side, one that speaks not to cleanliness but to avoidance. People were constantly trying to avoid sickness, foul smells, and the invisible dangers they believed drifted through the air. Medieval medical theories were shaped by the concept of miasma, the idea that sickness came from bad air. And so, hygiene became not just a matter of personal care, but also of survival. Window openings were placed strategically so stale air could escape. Herbs like lavender, sage, and mint were hung in bunches inside rooms to purify the atmosphere. Smoke itself was considered cleansing. The burning of aromatic wood wasn't only for warmth but also for protection. Even streets reflected this belief. Though often dirty, they were occasionally sprinkled with straw or herbs to absorb waste and reduce bad smells. In wealthier towns, certain streets were cleaned at weekly intervals, especially those near markets or churches. And while sanitation was primitive by modern standards, people were often more conscious of odors than we give them credit for, simply because they believed those odors carried disease. Another, understated aspect of medieval hygiene was hand-washing. While full immersion in water was rare, washing hands before eating was surprisingly common. Water was poured from pitchers over a person's hands into a basin below, the cool stream rinsing away dirt accumulated from farming, cooking, or crafting. In wealthier households, scented water might be used, infused with rose petals, mint, or citrus peels. The simple act of washing before meals was one of the most consistently practiced forms of cleanliness, rooted in both etiquette and belief. As the day in the castle continued, the rhythms of work shaped how people stayed clean. Craftsmen brushed dust from their clothes. Cooks wiped their hands on linen cloths or aprons. Children splashed their faces at the well. Servants, always in motion, found small moments to refresh themselves, a quick rinse of the hands, a comb through the hair, a wipe of the brows. There was also the matter of teeth, which people often assume were neglected entirely. In reality, medieval people frequently used toothpicks or small twigs with frayed ends to clean their mouths. Some used ash mixed with salt to scrub their teeth, a method both abrasive and effective. Chewing herbs like mint or sage freshened the breath, especially before gatherings or meals. Priests, monks, and noble families had access to slightly more refined tooth powders, often containing crushed spices or herbs. While dental care could not match modern standards, the effort to maintain the mouth was far more intentional than the stereotypes suggest. By noon, the castle had settled into its familiar hum. The smell of bread cooling in the kitchens blended with the faint smoke drifting from torches. People moved through their tasks, each in their own rhythm, each shaped by the expectations of their station. Hygiene for them was not a luxury, it was woven quietly into survival, comfort, and dignity. In the afternoon, a gentle warmth entered the corridors as the sun shifted toward the western side of the castle. Servants carried buckets of water for cooking, cleaning, or bathing someone of higher rank. A noblewoman might request a basin of warm water to wash her face, arms, and neck before resting. A traveling merchant might do the same before meeting a local lord. These small washes were not indulgences, they were ordinary moments of refreshment that softened the fatigue of the day. Even peasants returning from the fields took time to clean themselves as best they could. A quick rinse at a trough, a wiping down with a damp cloth, or simply brushing the skin with straw or cloth to remove dust. They knew that clean skin, however minimally achieved, felt better, reduced itching, and made sleep more comfortable. Hygiene was also deeply intertwined with ritual. Before entering a church, many people washed their hands or faces, believing it important to present themselves modestly in the presence of the sacred. Pilgrims washed their feet upon arriving at a monastery. Midwives washed their hands before tending to a birth, even though they didn't understand germs. They simply knew that it mattered. And while the medieval world was often harsh, dirty, and physically demanding, people found comfort in these small rituals. They built their days around them, using them as anchors in a life full of uncertainty. For them, cleanliness wasn't just practical, it was grounding, soothing, familiar. As the afternoon wore on, shadows lengthened and the castle's stone corridors cooled again. The soft murmurs of people preparing for evening began to echo faintly, and with those sounds, another layer of medieval hygiene slowly emerged, one tied not only to the body but to the spaces where people lived, slept, and sought shelter from the world outside. Evening approached slowly, as though the castle itself were exhaling after the long stretch of daylight. The sun dipped lower behind the distant hills, casting a warm amber glow through narrow windows and leaving soft stripes of faded gold on the stone floors. People began moving with quieter steps now, winding down their tasks as the air cooled and the energy of the day softened into something gentler, more reflective. With this change came an entirely different set of habits related to hygiene, smaller, quieter practices shaped by comfort, preparation for rest, and the hope of feeling just a little lighter before sleep. As people prepared for the evening meal, one of the most universal rituals resurfaced, the washing of hands. Even in households that could not afford elaborate basins or scented water, the act was a meaningful one. A servant might carry a simple ewer from person to person, pouring water over their hands as they rubbed away the grime of the day. The stream splashed into a shallow bowl, and the rippling sound of water mingled with murmured conversations and the soft clatter of wooden cups being set out for supper. It was a sound that signaled transition, a gentle reminder that a long day of work was giving way to quiet nourishment. For those of higher rank, the evening wash sometimes involved more than just hands. A noblewoman, after spending hours managing household affairs or visiting nearby lands, might request warm water to wash her face and neck. Attendants brought linen cloths, carefully folded and scented with crushed herbs or flowers that had been placed among the linens. The washing was slow and deliberate. The warm cloth pressed lightly against her skin, removing dust and sweat, leaving behind the faint fragrance of lavender or mint. There was something soothing in the delicacy of it, in the way warm water could soften the muscles of the face and ease the tension around the eyes. Children, too, had their own small routines. After playing in courtyards, fields, or narrow alleys between cottages, they often returned with dirt streaked across their faces, arms, and legs. Before supper, mothers would wipe them down with damp cloths, scrubbing gently but firmly, while the children squirmed and laughed, or whimpered depending on their mood. The cloth moved across cheeks, down noses, behind ears, across dusty knees. The process wasn't always graceful, but it was deeply familiar, one of those little scenes that echoed through generations, unchanged except in the tools used. Inside towns, the atmosphere before evening meals could be lively. Merchants closed their stalls, Food vendors prepared final dishes, and people gathered near wells or fountains to wash quickly before returning home. The splashing of water on stone was a constant companion to the fading light. Even in poorer quarters, where water was harder to access, families still found ways to rinse hands and faces using shared bowls or collected rainwater. No matter how little they possessed, people valued the comfort of feeling refreshed before sitting down to eat. In monasteries, the rhythm was calmer and more structured. Monks followed precise rules governing cleanliness and routine. Before their evening prayers and supper, they would file into a washing area where water basins had been prepared. They washed in silence, dipping their hands into cool water or pouring it gently over their fingers. Some monasteries even used scented water from herbs grown in their gardens, creating a faint, peaceful aroma that floated through the stone halls. A sense of reflection accompanied every movement, for even the act of washing was considered a form of preparation for prayer, a cleansing not only of the body but of the mind. As dusk deepened, the castle kitchens became the warmest, most fragrant place in the entire fortress. The scent of roasted vegetables, bread, and simmering stews drifted through hallways, making even the most tired servant feel a spark of comfort. The cooks, having endured the smoky heat of the hearth all day, wiped their faces with cloths dampened from nearby barrels or basins. Their aprons were dusted with flour and herbs, their hands red from chopping and kneading. Yet even they paused long enough to rinse their hands thoroughly before the evening meal. It was both a matter of cleanliness and respect, especially in households where everyone, regardless of rank, was expected to observe basic rituals before eating. After supper, another type of hygiene practice emerged, particularly among those living in the countryside: the checking of bedding. In a world without chemical treatments or modern fabrics, people had to be mindful of pests that lived in straw mattresses or woolen blankets. Before sleep, many families lifted the bedding, shook it out, beat it lightly to dislodge insects, and brushed away stray debris. The sound of hands patting straw, the soft rustle of blankets, and the occasional sigh or muttered complaint formed a nightly symphony that many medieval homes knew well. People understood that warmth attracted pests, so beds were often aired out during the day, placed near an open door or window so sunshine or fresh air could pass over them. This evening ritual was not perfect and pests were impossible to eliminate entirely, but it made sleep a little easier, a little less itchy, and certainly more peaceful. In wealthier homes, bedding included sheets of linen, which were easier to wash and shake clean. Servants might spend the early evening brushing them, beating dust from quilts, or sprinkling them lightly with herbs such as lavender or chamomile to produce a calming scent. These fragrances drifted softly through the sleeping chambers, mingling with the cool night air and creating an atmosphere that eased the mind into rest. But even with these efforts, people of the medieval world did not expect to feel perfectly clean. They lived closer to the earth than we do now, accepting dust, sweat, and natural odors as part of life. Cleanliness was not measured by modern standards. It was measured by what brought comfort, what eased the body, what helped the mind settle. And so, their nightly routines were shaped more by practicality and habit than by the pursuit of perfect hygiene. One of the more surprising evening practices involved feet. After a full day of walking on rough ground, through forests, across muddy fields, or along uneven streets, people's feet took much of the strain. Many families kept small wooden buckets or clay basins near the hearth for washing feet before bed, especially in the colder months. Warm water soothed sore muscles and washed away dirt, leaving behind a sense of relief that made sleep easier. For some, it was the only warm wash they experienced that day, and the steam rising from the bucket filled the room with a comforting softness. In castles, this practice was more refined. A nobleman might sit by the fire while a servant brought warm water and gently washed his feet, drying them with thick linen cloths. It was both an act of service and an ancient tradition, rooted in hospitality and honor. Even in monasteries, foot washing held symbolic meaning, often tied to humility and compassion. Monks sometimes washed each other's feet as part of religious observance, reminding themselves of their commitment to serve and care for others. Another small but important aspect of evening hygiene involved hair. Throughout the day, people wore head coverings, coifs, caps, hoods, or veils to protect their hair from dust and smoke. When evening came, these coverings were removed, shaken out, and hung near the fire, or laid neatly on stools. Then came the slow, gentle combing of hair. Wooden combs passed through strands with patient movements, catching tangles, removing dust, and easing tension from the scalp. For women with long hair, this process could take several minutes. Some combed their hair while seated near family members, exchanging stories of the day in soft voices, while the fire crackled quietly nearby. In wealthier families, evening combing was accompanied by fragrant oils, rosemary, mint, rose petals, or even simple animal fat mixed with herbs. The scent was subtle but grounding, something that lingered faintly as sleep approached. In poorer homes, even without oils, the act of combing was soothing and necessary, helping people feel a little more human after a long, demanding day. Throughout towns and villages, candles were lit as darkness deepened. Their soft glow revealed small gestures of tidiness. Cloths hung to dry, pitchers refilled for the next morning, shoes scraped clean of mud, tools wiped down with rags before being set aside. These small acts, though not always recognized as hygiene in the modern sense, played a crucial role in creating a sense of order in homes that were often cramped and chaotic. And then came the quietest moment of all, the transition to sleep. People settled onto straw mattresses, woolen blankets, or furs laid carefully on wooden frames. The smell of herbs in the bedding rose softly when bodies pressed down, releasing faint traces of lavender, sage, or chamomile. The air cooled further, and the comforting weight of blankets eased the mind toward dreams. Children curled against parents, older siblings whispered to younger ones, and couples exchanged a few last words before drifting into silence. The crackling of the hearth, the distant hoot of an owl, or the soft rush of wind through wooden shutters formed the backdrop to their rest. And beneath it all was the simple satisfaction of having completed another day's routines, of having washed hands, brushed hair, cleaned bedding, or washed feet. These small rituals did not make them perfectly clean, but made them comfortable enough to surrender to sleep. As the castle, the village, and the fields fell into deeper quiet, the world settled under the soft weight of night. And while the medieval people sleeping within it could hardly imagine the comforts of modern hygiene, they knew the value of feeling just a little refreshed, a little soothed, a little lighter before sleep. Night settled fully over the medieval world, draping villages, castles, and fields in a quiet darkness that felt deeper than anything we know today. Without the hum of machines or the glow of electric lights, the silence wrapped around everything with a softness that made even the smallest sound seem amplified. The creak of a shutter shifting in the wind, the distant call of a night bird, the rustle of straw as someone turned in bed. In this deep quiet, another layer of medieval life slowly unfolded. The awareness of nighttime hygiene, the small precautions taken before sleep, and the unspoken worries that drifted through people's minds in the hours between dusk and dawn. As people lay down, the lingering scent of herbs in their bedding mingled with the cool breath of night air, slipping through cracks in the walls. Most families slept close together, sharing warmth and space, turning the sleeping chamber into a cluster of quiet breaths and slow movements. Before finally closing their eyes, many performed little routines, subtle gestures that helped them feel settled. A hand brushed over a blanket to smooth it. A parent tucked a child closer. Someone adjusted a pillow filled with feathers or straw. These habits were more than practical, they were comforting, something to anchor the mind as it sank slowly toward sleep. Yet sleep was never completely uncomplicated in the medieval world. People were intensely aware of their surroundings, especially at night. The crackling fire might weaken, sending soft glows flickering across the room. The wooden door might shift as the wind pressed against it. A dog might bark in the courtyard, or a horse rustle in its stall. Each sound carried meaning, sometimes harmless, sometimes prompting caution. And so, before falling fully asleep, many households checked their living spaces one last time. A father might step outside briefly, glancing across the darkened field to ensure no embers threatened the wooden barns. A servant might walk through the corridors of a castle with a small lantern, making sure candles were safely extinguished. A shepherd might check the gate of his pen, listening for wolves. Hygiene in the medieval world wasn't only about the body, it was about protecting the space where life rested. Inside homes, people also took simple precautions to keep pests away during sleep. Breadcrumbs and bits of food were brushed from tables and floors, not because cleanliness was a luxury, but because leaving food out meant waking to unwanted visitors, mice, beetles, or other creatures drawn to scent. Even the act of covering leftover food with cloth or hanging meat high on hooks was part of nightly hygiene, a quiet routine of tidying that made the home safer and more comfortable. In wealthier households, servants performed these tasks. They swept briefly, wiped surfaces with damp cloths, and made sure wash basins were emptied so stagnant water didn't attract insects. They checked chamber pots, replaced linens, and collected anything that might need washing the next morning. The nighttime calm of a noble family's sleeping quarters was shaped by these small, unseen efforts carried out by tired hands that often received no recognition. Once everything was quiet again, families drifted into the first phase of sleeper phase that, in medieval life, was typically shorter than the deep sleep that followed. People often experienced what modern scholars call segmented sleep. They slept for a few hours, then woke naturally in the middle of the night before drifting back to sleep again. This waking time was not seen as strange. It was a familiar part of life, a time when people might pray softly, stir the fire, speak quietly with a spouse, or simply reflect in the quiet darkness. During this period of wakefulness, nighttime hygiene sometimes appeared in small forms. Someone might drink water from a wooden cup to soothe a dry throat. A mother might check on a child, adjusting their blanket or wiping their forehead if the child felt warm. A laborer whose muscles ached from a long day might rub his arms or legs with oil saved from the evening meal, letting the faint warmth ease the tightness. A young woman might use the time to reap in her hair if it had loosened during sleep. These small actions, performed softly, blended into the quiet pulse of the night. Outside, the village remained dark. The only lights came from the occasional lantern or from stars scattered across the sky. Those who rose to tend animals or check on the hearth moved quietly, guided by memory more than sight. The narrow alleys of the town were silent, except for the occasional footsteps of a night watchman or the distant splash of water where a river flowed. In castles, guards walked along battlements, their cloaks brushing stone as they passed. The sound of their boots echoed faintly in the still air, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, life continued its slow, deliberate rhythm. Some people used the nighttime waking period to tend to things they could not do during the day. Women might mend clothing by candlelight, stitching quietly while the rest of the family slept. Men might check tools or gently scrape mud from their boots. These tasks were done softly, carefully, both to avoid waking others and to maintain a sense of peace in the stillness. After some time, the night stretched on, and the second phase of sleep pulled people back under. This was the deeper, heavier sleep, the kind that restored aching muscles, quieted the mind, and allowed the body to heal. The air grew cooler as the fire dwindled, and blankets rustled as people shifted closer together for warmth. In castles, thick tapestries blocked drafts from stone walls, creating pockets of warmth where noble families slept. Hours passed like this, deep breathing, quiet spaces, the subtle shifting of bodies, and then, slowly, the energy of the world changed again. Dawn approached. It did not arrive suddenly. It crept gently, long before sunlight, as a faint paling of the darkness. Birds began to stir, first one, then several, filling the early air with soft chirps. Roosters crowed in distant farmyards. Wind moved differently, no longer heavy with night's chill, but carrying the faintest promise of morning warmth. And the castle, the village, and the fields all slowly woke again. With waking came the earliest morning hygiene. People rubbed sleep from their eyes, stretched stiff limbs, and reached for linen cloths kept near the bed. Some wiped their faces with cold water to chase away the last of drowsiness. Others combed their hair briefly, unbraiding or retwisting it before stepping into the day. Parents checked their children's faces, brushing aside hair that had tangled during the night. In monasteries, monks washed their hands and faces before prayer, the cold water sharpening their senses. Then came one of the simplest but most universal tasks, cleaning the hearth. Ash was swept out, embers were checked, and new wood was placed on the fire for warmth and cooking. This small act was both practical and symbolic. It cleared the remains of the previous day and prepared the home for what was to come. In this way, morning hygiene merged with the foundational rhythms of medieval life, tying the cycles of sleep, waking, and cleanliness into one continuous flow. The world brightened slowly, and the sounds of daily life began again, doors opening, animals stirring, voices rising in quiet conversation. People stepped into the morning air, carrying buckets, tools, and baskets. They washed their hands or faces, shook out their clothes, tied hair back, and prepared for the work ahead. And so another day began, shaped by the same small rituals that had guided countless mornings before it. Cleanliness was not perfect, nor was it constant, but it was woven into the rhythms of waking and resting, of working and pausing, of living and surviving. For medieval people, these small habits were enough. They gave structure to the day, comfort to the night, and a sense of control in a world full of uncertainties. The sun rose slowly over the land, touching stone and earth with soft light, and the story of medieval hygiene continued quietly, naturally, seamlessly shaped by countless hands, countless breaths, and countless moments of daily care. The day had softened into a gentle golden hush by the time the castle servants finished laying out the last baskets of fresh reeds. In the inner yard, the sun drooped low behind the walls, turning everything a warm shade of amber, and the breeze carried faint hints of hay, wood smoke, and the earthy scent of the moat. The pace of life in the castle shifted at this hour, when chores slowed, and the people who lived within these stone walls let themselves breathe for a moment before night folded over them. And somehow, in the midst of all this, the matter of staying clean did not exactly disappear, simply changed shape, becoming quieter, more private, more tied to personal rituals rather than the communal rhythms of the morning. As the shadows stretched longer, you could see figures heading in different directions, each with their own end-of-day routine. A young squire ducked into the stable loft to brush dust from his tunic with a handful of dry straw. A maid carried a small basin of warm water up a winding stair to the lady's chamber, careful not to spill a drop on the narrow stone steps. A cook paused outside the kitchen door, taking a moment just to rinse her hands in a bucket before returning to the lingering warmth of the hearth. The entire castle seemed to exhale as these small gestures played out, each one reflecting the simple truth that people, even centuries ago, needed some sense of cleanliness to feel at ease before sleep. Inside the castle's main hall, the last light from the windows fell across the long dining tables, catching on wooden cups and the scattered crumbs from the evening meal. A boy sweeping the floor paused to gather the crumbs into a small pile, then brushed them into a bucket so the animals wouldn't come sniffing during the night. Above him, banners shifted in the soft breeze, and the scent of roasted meat still lingered in the rafters. Even here, long after the bustle of dinner had ended, cleanliness mattered not in the modern sense of polished perfection, but as a way of maintaining order and comfort in a place where so many people shared the same space. In a corner near the hearth, an elderly man who had spent decades as a castle clerk leaned back on a wooden bench and quietly wiped the dust from his writing tools. His fingers were stained with ink, and he moved slowly, carefully, as if the brushes and quills were fragile pieces of his own memory. When he finished, he dipped a cloth into a cup of water and wiped his hands. The water was cool now, not warm, but he didn't mind. It was enough to feel a little fresher, a little more human. He dried his hands on his sleeve and let out a contented sigh. Not far away, a group of servants laughed softly as they stepped out into the courtyard, each carrying a small wooden bucket. They were heading toward the well, where they would gather water for their evening wash. The well itself was a familiar sight, a sturdy stone ring with thick wooden beams overhead, the rope worn smooth from years of use. The sky above had shifted into a dusky blue, and the first stars were beginning to wink into view. The servants moved with easy familiarity, lowering buckets, hauling them up, and pouring cool water into their basins. Some washed their faces right there in the open air, splashing water over their cheeks and letting it drip onto the packed earth below. Others filled their buckets and carried them off toward the servants' quarters, wanting more privacy. It wasn't tea, a deep or thorough washing. Nobody soaked themselves or scrubbed hard at this hour, but it was a small comfort, a little ritual that helped them shake off the dust and tasks of the day before slipping beneath their blankets. The sound of laughter carried softly across the yard, mixing with the splash of water and the occasional clank of metal as someone set a bucket down. These sounds became part of the nightly rhythm of the castle, just as important as the tolling of the bell or the closing of the great wooden doors. The simple act of washing, however brief, however modest, was enough to offer a sense of renewal. On the opposite side of the courtyard, a young woman lit a small lantern in her room and set it on a wooden table. The flame glowed warmly, illuminating a folded cloth, a comb with a few broken teeth, and a small jar containing a mixture of herbs steeped in oil. She dipped her fingers into the jar and rubbed a bit of the fragrant oil into her hair. The room filled with the scent of rosemary and lavender, a soothing earthy blend that made the space feel peaceful. She didn't have a mirror, most people didn't, but she combed her hair slowly, smoothing out the tangles with care. It wasn't vanity. It was a moment of quiet self-maintenance, a way of grounding herself after a long day. Her little sister, curled up on a blanket nearby, watched sleepily as the comb moved through the older girl's hair. The younger girl didn't bother with her own hair that night. She was too tired. Instead, she sniffed the air and smiled faintly at the herbal scent. Soon she would drift off to sleep, comforted not just by the warmth of the blankets, but by the familiarity of the nightly rituals happening around her. Meanwhile, in another part of the castle, a knight returned from a patrol outside the walls. His armor was dusty and flecked with dried mud, and his boots left marks on the stone floor as he walked. He moved straight toward the armory, where an attendant waited with tools for cleaning and maintaining the metal plates. The knight began unfastening the buckles and straps, relieving himself of the weight one piece at a time. Beneath the armor, his padded gambeson was damp with sweat, and he grimaced slightly at the sensation. Once the armor was set aside, he grabbed a basin of warm water the attendant had prepared. It wasn't enough for a full wash, but it was enough to wipe down his neck, arms, and face. The warmth of the water loosened the stiffness in his muscles, and he breathed out deeply, savoring the comfort. Then he changed into a simple linen shirt, feeling much lighter, almost as if he'd stepped out of one skin and into another. It was remarkable how even a small amount of washing could transform the way someone felt, especially after wearing heavy armor all day. In the ladies' chamber, the air was calmer, perfumed with the faint scent of beeswax, candles, and the flowers that decorated the wooden chest near the window. The lady of the castle sat on a cushioned seat as her maid gently washed her hands with warm water poured from a jug. She dipped her fingers into a small bowl containing a mixture of rose petals and herbs. This was a luxury reserved for noblewomen, a touch of refinement that made the process of daily hygiene feel graceful and delicate. Afterward, the maid dried her lady's hands with a clean linen cloth and set the bowl aside. The lady smiled softly, closing her eyes for a moment as the warmth lingered on her skin. As night thickened around the castle, the torches along the walls flickered to life, casting soft, golden light across the courtyard. Guards moved into position for the night shift, their silhouettes steady and familiar. Some carried small flasks of scented oil or resin to dab on their wrists or necks, not out of vanity, but to mask the smell of sweat during long hours of watch. The scents were earthy, sometimes smoky, and surprisingly pleasant. Even the guards, whose duties required focus and endurance, embraced these tiny comforts. In the servants' quarters, a cluster of women gathered around a small fire, chatting quietly as they brushed the dust from their skirts. One of them passed around a pouch of dried herbs used for simple cleansing. They dusted their hands and arms with it, then brushed it off, letting the herb mixture take some of the day's smells with it. The younger servants listened intently as the older ones swapped stories of their youth and the rituals their families used to follow in their villages, some using cold rivers for daily bathing, others heating water over a fire and sharing it among siblings. Laughter bubbled up now and then, soft and warm, wrapped in the crackle of the fire. Not far from them, a man sat on a small stool, using a cloth to carefully wipe down his wooden shoes. He did this every night, not because he feared dirt, but because the act calmed him. There was something rhythmic about it, something that settled the mind. Nearby, a pot of water warmed gently over the low flames, waiting for the group to take turns washing their feet before bed. Clean feet were seen as a small blessing after long days of standing, walking, or carrying heavy loads. And so, one by one, they dipped their feet into the warm water, sighed with relief, and dried them with shared cloths. The castle gradually grew quieter. The hallways became dim, the courtyard still, and the sounds of the day faded into memory. But even as silence settled in, there were still a few lights burning. One of the midwives, known for her gentle nature, prepared a small mixture of herbs and warm water to clean her hands before tending to a woman in the outer village. Hygiene mattered immensely in her work. She had seen too many tragedies caused by infections that took hold before anyone understood them. So she washed her hands carefully, scrubbing beneath her nails and rubbing her palms together until the water cooled. Then she dried them on her apron and gathered her tools before slipping quietly through a side gate into the night. Elsewhere, the castle's healer sat by his window, grinding herbs into powder with a small stone mortar. Some were for cleaning wounds, others for soothing skin or easing fevers. He worked methodically, his hands moving in practiced motions. The faint smell of crushed mint and sage filled the room. Every so often he paused to wipe his hands on a cloth soaked in vinegar water, a simple but effective way to keep them clean while he worked. The cloth was rough, but he didn't mind. Cleanliness for him was more than routine, it was a calling, a responsibility. Outside, beyond the castle walls, the village settled into its own rhythm of nighttime hygiene and rest. Families gathered around hearths, washing their faces with bowls of water heated gently over the fire. Children giggled as their mothers wiped the smudges of the day from their cheeks. Men rinsed their hands after finishing their tasks in the fields or workshops. The air filled with comforting scent spread, cooling on wooden boards, herbs drying near chimneys, and the faint musk of animals settling into their stalls. In one cottage, an elderly woman prepared her nightly herbal steam in a clay pot. She sprinkled dried leaves into the water and leaned over it, letting the warm vapor rise against her face. It soothed her breathing, softened her skin, and reminded her of her youth. Afterward, she dabbed her face with a linen cloth and lay down on her cot, feeling refreshed despite the simplicity of the ritual. In another home, a young couple washed their newborn with warm water, careful not to let the chill of night touch the baby's skin. They used a soft cloth, dipping it into the basin and running it gently along the baby's arms and legs. The infant made tiny noises, half whimpers, half sighs, as the warmth relaxed them. When the washing was done, the couple wrapped the baby in a clean cloth and held them close, rocking gently as the fire crackled nearby. The entire medieval world, from the highest towers of the castle to the humblest village huts, moved through these nightly rituals with quiet intention. They were small acts, simple washings, gentle herbal treatments, a comb through the hair, a warm footbath, but each carried meaning. They were gestures of care, echoes of humanity, and essential moments of transition between the bustle of day and the peace of night. And so, as the castle lamps burned low and the last figures drifted toward their resting places, the world softened into stillness. Even in an age without the luxuries of modern hygiene, people found ways to feel clean enough, comforted enough, and peaceful enough to surrender to sleep. The night wrapped itself around them like a blanket, carrying the soft rhythms of their rituals into dreams. The castle had grown so quiet now that even the faintest sounds seemed to echo gently through its corridors. The soft sigh of wind slipping past narrow stone windows, the distant rustle of straw shifting in the stables, the muted crackle of the last embers in the great hall's hearth, everything blended into a tapestry of nighttime peace. It was in this stillness that the deeper rituals of medieval cleanliness revealed themselves, not through noise or activity, but through subtle gestures and quiet habits woven into the fabric of daily life. In one of the upper chambers, a maid moved softly across the wooden floor, carrying a small clay lamp whose golden glow flickered against the walls. She set the lamp on a stool and knelt beside a low wooden tub. Earlier, she had filled it with warm water carried up from the kitchen hearth. Not enough for a true bath, but enough for something more intimate and comforting. This time of night belonged to the kind of washing that wasn't about removing dirt, but about preparing the body for rest. The lady of the chamber, wrapped in a soft linen gown, dipped her hands into the water and let the warmth seep into her skin. She cupped the water and gently splashed it over her face, inhaling the faint scent of lavender the maid had added earlier. It relaxed her shoulders, softened the tightness in her brow, and made her feel grounded after a long, complicated day. The maid watched quietly, ready to offer a cloth, but knowing not to disturb the calm. Moments like these were private, cherished, unspoken. Down the hallway, a young page sat on his mattress of straw and feathers, using a slightly frayed cloth to wipe the day's dust from his feet. His small candle cast a quiet halo of light around him. He worked slowly, carefully brushing between his toes, wincing occasionally when he found a tender spot from hours of running errands. When he finished, he stretched his legs and lay back, staring up at the ceiling beams. Cleaning himself at the end of each day made him feel older somehow, as if he was taking his first small steps into adulthood. Beneath the castle, in the lower chambers where the stone walls stayed cool no matter the season, the castle's healer was still awake. His room smelled of herbs, vinegar, oils, and parchment, a strange but soothing blend. He bent over a bowl of water infused with rosemary and mint, washing his hands thoroughly after grinding herbs and preparing treatments. He believed deeply in the power of cleanliness, even without knowing the science behind it. He had simply observed, through decades of tending to the sick, that those who kept their hands and tools cleaner lived longer, suffered fewer fevers, and healed faster. He dried his hands on a cloth, then paused, staring thoughtfully at the steam rising from the bowl. He murmured a quiet prayer for the health of the people he had treated that day, before extinguishing the lamp beside him. In the kitchen, a few servants finished wiping down the long wooden tables, scraping off lingering food bits, and tossing them into the scrap buckets meant for animals. A young woman dipped a cloth into a bucket of warm water mixed with ash soap and wiped the soot from her fingers. Her hands had worked tirelessly all day kneading dough, carrying pots, tending fires, and now, as she cleaned them, she felt an almost emotional release. The kitchen, normally bustling, felt like a sanctuary at night. She took a final moment to rinse her hands in clean water, enjoying the warmth before the night became cold. Outside, the moon had risen fully, casting silver light across the courtyard. The shapes of the castle walls looked softer under its glow, less harsh and imposing, more like the protective shell of a sleeping giant. In the open air, a stable boy finished brushing down the horses for the night. The animals stood quietly, tails swishing lazily, eyes half closed. After tending to them all, he washed his arms and hands in a bucket of cool water. The cold made him gasp, but it also cleared his mind. He dried his arms with a bit of old cloth and leaned against a wooden post, listening to the steady breathing of the horses. There was a sense of peace in the stable that he loved deeply, a sense of order, warmth, and simple living. Near the stables, a small cluster of guards gathered at the start of the night watch. They passed around a tiny tin of herbal ointment one of them had made from crushed mint and animal fat. Each dabbed a small amount on their neck or wrists. The ointment masked sweat, soothed irritated skin, and provided a comforting scent as they prepared for long hours of quiet vigilance atop the walls. One of the older guards chuckled softly as the youngest applied far too much, but the youth didn't mind. These little customs helped bind them together, forming small comforts in the long, cold hours. Beyond the walls, the village had wound down into its own nighttime rituals. In one cottage, a mother bathed her children using water warmed over the hearth, carefully wiping their faces, arms, and legs. The children giggled as she washed behind their ears, squirming away whenever the cloth got too warm. Once she finished, she wrapped them in blankets and ushered them toward their sleeping area, where they lay on soft straw covered with linen. They whispered stories to each other, still smelling faintly of the herbs she always added to their washwater. In the cottage next door, a blacksmith sat by a small basin, washing the metal dust and soot from his arms. His skin was always darkened from the forge, but he gently scrubbed away what he could, sighing with relief as the warm water loosened the tightness in his muscles. His wife combed her hair nearby, the firelight catching the strands and turning them into soft ribbons of red and gold. The blacksmith finished washing and used the remaining water to rinse his hands again before pouring the rest onto the hearthstones, where it hissed softly. In another part of the village, an elderly farmer soaked his feet in a wooden bowl filled with warm water and sage leaves. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, humming an old tune his father used to sing while working the fields. His wife peeled strips from a fresh cloth and braided them into simple cloth bandages, which she would soak in her homemade vinegar water mixture for cleaning minor cuts and scratches the next day. Between them, the room held a comforting warmth, the kind that made even the hardest days feel at peace. As the night deepened, the castle's inner courtyard grew still. A lone cat padded silently across the cobblestones, pausing now and then to listen. The air was cool, almost crisp, carrying hints of damp stone and distant trees. In the corner of the yard, a basin of water left behind by a servant reflected the moonlight like a small silver mirror. The castle seemed to sleep, but within its walls, small pockets of life continued to move softly. Inside one chamber, a scholar sat with a candle burning low beside him. His hands, stained from ink and dust, moved slowly as he cleaned them with a rag dipped in warm water. He rubbed his fingers gently, knowing that if he fell asleep with ink on them, he would wake with smudged sheets and stained skin. The act of washing had become part of his nightly ritual, a final gesture that signaled his mind to quiet itself after hours spent reading ancient texts. When his hands were clean, he dried them carefully and blew out the candle, letting darkness wrap around him like a familiar cloak. On the lower floor, a group of young servants sat in a circle, passing around a small jar of coarse salt mixed with herbs. They used it as a makeshift scrub, rubbing it on their arms and faces to feel refreshed after long work. Laughter bubbled up as one of them recoiled from the strong scent, though they all agreed it helped strip away the day's grime. When they had finished, they rinsed themselves with a shared bucket of water and then wrapped in blankets, huddling together as the room cooled. Up in one of the tower chambers, a noblewoman's attendant carefully unbraided her mistress's long hair. The braids had held dust, and when the strands were released, They fell softly around her shoulders. The attendant brushed the hair gently, using a fine comb that shone faintly in the candlelight. With each stroke, the noblewoman felt her thoughts drifting, the tensions of the day loosening like the knots in her hair. When the brushing was done, the attendant dabbed a small amount of rose oil onto her hands and smoothed it lightly onto the ends of the noblewoman's hair. It smelled faintly sweet and made the hair shine. It wasn't necessary, but it brought her comfort, and that was enough. In the quiet of her own chamber, one of the older servants sat on her bed, dipping a cloth into a bowl of warm water mixed with chamomile. She pressed the cloth to her face, letting the warmth sink into her skin and soothe the fine lines etched by years of work and worry. She leaned back with her eyes closed, savoring the brief moment of peace. When she finally removed the cloth, her face felt refreshed, and she whispered a quiet wish for restful sleep before settling under her blankets. The castle healer, now preparing for his own rest, inspected the herbs hanging from beams along his ceiling. He ran his fingers over bundles of sage, thyme, yarrow and mint, checking that they were drying properly. He believed that clean air and herbs kept illness at bay, so he always ensured the room smelled faintly medicinal. Before lying down, he washed his hands once more in cool water, rubbing them briskly, before drying them on a cloth he had washed earlier that day. It was his final ritual, the one that told his body that his work was done. Outside, the wind brushed gently against the walls, carrying with it the distant chorus of frogs near the moat and the soft hoot of an owl perched nearby. For the guards on watch, the air felt crisp against their freshly washed hands and faces. One leaned on the parapet, staring at the moonlit landscape beyond the walls. He inhaled deeply, the faint mint of the ointment still lingering on his skin. It kept him alert, refreshed, ready to stay awake through the slow sweep of the night. In the servants' quarters, the last whispers faded as one by one they drifted into sleep. Some had washed more thoroughly, others only lightly, but all felt the comfort of having shed the day's weight. Their rooms, so simple and sparse, held a sense of calm that only came after familiar rituals were completed. The faint scent of lavender from a drying bundle hung near the door, mingled with the smell of fresh straw, creating an unexpected gentleness. As the castle settled fully into slumber, even the animals grew quiet. The dogs curled near the kitchen door, tails tucked close to their bodies, dreaming of the scraps they had been given earlier. The horses rested peacefully in their stalls, their coats brushed clean for the night. Even the sheep in the outer pens shifted only occasionally, bleating softly in their sleep. All across the medieval world, in castles, villages, cottages, and farms, these nightly rituals unfolded in ways shaped by culture, class, and simple necessity. Cleanliness was not perfection, nor was it always possible in harsh conditions, but it was a thread that ran through the lives of everyone, rich or poor. The desire to feel a little fresher, a little more comfortable, a little more human before sleep was universal. And so, under the watch of the moon and stars, the people breathed out the last remnants of the day and felt themselves sink gently into rest. The world grew quieter still, the air cooled, and the rhythms of night took hold. In this softness, in this stillness, the medieval world felt surprisingly familiar, a place where people longed for comfort, warmth, and the small cleansing rituals that made sleep come easier. As the castle drifted deeper into the softness of night, the world seemed to slow to a gentle pulse. The torches on the ramparts burned lower now, their flames wavering quietly in the breeze, casting long shadows that stretched and faded across the stone. Within the thick walls, almost everyone had settled into sleep, yet a few faint traces of life still lingered in the quiet darkness. Soft breaths, distant footsteps, the creaking of old wood adjusting to the cool air. In one of the upper corridors, a servant carrying a small lantern made her final round of the night. Her steps were light and careful as she peered into each chamber to ensure the lamps were safely extinguished. The flame in her lantern flickered against the walls, catching the carved edges of wooden doors and the subtle patterns in the stone. She paused outside a room where a child had left a small basin of water by the entrance. Kneeling slowly, she checked the basin, ensuring the child hadn't forgotten to wash before sleep, and smiled at the sight of the damp cloth draped neatly over the rim. These small signs of routine always warmed her heart. She continued down the hallway, pausing only to pull a shutter closed where a draught whispered through. Her own day had been long, filled with tasks from dawn until this moment, yet she treasured the stillness of night. There was something soothing about knowing everything was in its place, that people had finished their washing and settled under their blankets, that the castle breathed like a single living being now resting peacefully. In the courtyard below, a guard shifted his weight as he stood near the main gate. His hands, recently washed with cool water from a bucket kept nearby, felt refreshed against the leather of his gloves. He inhaled the crisp night air and exhaled slowly, watching the faint cloud of his breath drift and dissolve. Even guards, who lived through cycles of wakefulness and fatigue, cherished the small comfort of washing their faces before settling into their long shifts. It cleared the mind, sharpened the senses, and made the endless dark hours feel a little less heavy. Beyond the guard, the moonlight spilled across the well, turning the water at its surface into a shimmering disk of silver. The rope hung still, the bucket resting just above the waterline after someone had drawn it earlier. A few ripples drifted gently across the surface, reflecting the moon and the faint glow of distant torchlight. In the silence, it almost looked like another world beneath the surface, calm, distant, unreachable. Inside the castle, the healer lay awake for a little while longer. Though his work was done for the day, his mind often wandered through the small details of cleanliness and care. He remembered the elderly woman from the village he had treated earlier, her hands rough from years of labor but carefully washed before she came to see him. He admired how even those with the least means often found ways to keep themselves clean with simple water, herbs, and cloth, their rituals born from tradition and necessity. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, letting the thought comfort him. The world, vast and unpredictable, was held together by these tiny acts of care. Down in the kitchen, a single ember still glowed in the great fire, pulsing faintly like a sleeping heartbeat. A pot, scrubbed clean earlier, hung from its hook, and the wooden tables had been wiped and swept. A faint smell of cooked onions and bread still hovered in the air, softened by the cool night breeze slipping in through the slightly open window. The kitchen felt peaceful now, free of the smoke and heat that filled it during the day. Outside the castle walls, the village had grown still as well. The night wrapped itself around the cottages like a blanket. In one home, a mother stirred in her sleep and pulled the blanket closer around her child. The faint scent of herbs clung to them, the smell of their nightly washwater, a mix of crushed mint and warm steam. The fire in their hearth had burned down to a quiet orange glow. A bowl of water, used for washing just before bed, still sat near the hearth, its surface reflecting the light from the fading embers. The mother had taught her children that ending each day with a simple washing kept the body calm and the spirit peaceful. In another cottage, a potter lay awake, his hands resting on his chest. They were clean now, though earlier they had been stained with clay. He had washed them carefully, using a cloth soaked in warm water infused with thyme. As he drifted into sleep, he felt grateful for the warmth of the bowl, for the quiet ritual that washed away the dust of his work. These moments were grounding, reminders that even though his days were long, the nights held a gentler rhythm. A few steps away, a midwife sat by her window, brushing her hair slowly. She had washed her hands thoroughly earlier, scrubbing with vinegar water and soap made from ash and animal fat. Clean hands were her lifeline, the difference between life and death in her work. Now, she brushed her hair to relax her mind, letting the strokes become steady and soothing. Outside the window, the moon hung low and full, bathing the thatched roofs of the village in soft silver. She whispered a quiet prayer for the families she had visited that day before setting her brush aside and blowing out the lamp. Back in the castle, the servants' quarters were filled with soft breathing, bodies curled under blankets, faces turned toward dreams. In one corner, an older servant stirred and sat up briefly, reaching for the small bowl of water she kept near her bed. She dampened a cloth and pressed it gently to her forehead. It was a habit she'd had since she was young, something her mother had always done before sleep, a simple way to cool the skin, calm the thoughts, and ease into rest. After a moment, she placed the cloth beside her and slipped back under the blankets, the chill of the water fading into comfort. In another room, two young servants slept side by side, exhausted from a day of carrying firewood and drawing water. Their feet had been aching when they settled in, so the older servants had warmed a small pot of water for them to wash their feet before bed. Now, their faces were peaceful, the clean feeling lingering even in sleep. The warmth of the footwash had soothed them like a lullaby. Meanwhile, in a small tower room, a nobleman sat by his window, unable to fully drift off just yet. He reached for a basin of warm water placed beside his chair and dipped a cloth into it. Slowly, he wiped his hands, then his neck, letting the warmth relax him. He paused, the cloth resting against his skin, while he gazed out over the moonlit courtyard below. Despite all his responsibilities and burdens, moments like these, small, private rituals of cleanliness, made him feel more human, less weighed down. When he finished, he set the cloth aside and lay down, letting the cool night air brush against his face as he drifted towards sleep. Far above him, in the highest tower, the master of the castle made his own quiet preparations for bed. He dipped his hands in a bowl of cool water and rubbed them gently, washing away the ink from writing letters and reviewing documents. He dried them on a cloth embroidered with his family's crest, and then sat on the edge of his bed for a long moment, listening to the silence. He thought of the generations before him, of how they too had washed their hands at the end of long days, how these simple acts connected him to a past that stretched far beyond his lifetime. Then he lay back, the heavy blankets settling over him like the night sky settling over the earth. Throughout the castle, a sense of softness hung in the air, not silence exactly, but the softness of life, slowing, unwinding, preparing for dreams. Even the animals felt it. The dogs near the kitchen slept curled in tight circles, their freshly cleaned coats warm and soft. The horses in the stable breathed slowly and rhythmically, their stalls swept and their hooves checked before nightfall. A faint scent of hay drifted through the open stable door, mixing with the cool night air. Beyond the walls, in the forest that bordered the village, the river flowed quietly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ribbons. A few villagers had fetched water from it earlier in the evening, using it to wash their hands and faces after tending the fields. The river belonged to the land, the seasons, the moon, but it also belonged to the people who relied on it each day. Its waters carried life, nourishment, and the gift of simple nightly cleansing. Up above, the night sky opened wide, stars scattered like seeds across dark earth. The world felt vast and endless, yet intimately quiet. Every small ritual, every bowl of warm water, every cloth dabbed gently against the skin, every brushstroke through hair, every foot washed before bed, had contributed to this stillness. Cleanliness in the medieval world was not perfection. It was these quiet moments of care, tender and unhurried, that made life feel softer, more bearable, more connected. And so the castle slept, the village slept, the land slept. In that soft silvery calm, the world continued breathing, held gently by the night, wrapped in the comfort of small rituals that carried people from waking into dreaming, from dust into peace, from the weight of the day into the lightness of rest.